Hey, everybody. This is Dana Pickley, editor-in-chief of Queer Media Matters, and I have two incredible people here with me. I have Sam, is it Feder or Feeder?
Fader.
Fader!
Yeah,
Sam
like dark.
Fader, the director and producer of the new documentary on Netflix, Disclosure, and the most excellent actor, Jen Richards.
Hi, everyone.
It's just also, just in case we have any issues, I'm also recording on audio just so you can stay safe. So yes, as I was saying, fantastic documentary. Loved it so much. So I was like, immediately was like, I have to talk to these guys. Sam, I'd love to start with you. How did you get involved with the Disclosure documentary in the first place?
So, there were two films that really changed my life and changed my relationship to the media. Celluloid Closet, which is about gay and lesbian representation.
I was going to ask you if that was okay, because I had such Celluloid Closet feels watching Disclosure. Okay.
Your feels were
Please
spot
continue.
on. And then the second one is a documentary by Marlon Riggs, who is more known for his experimental films, but he made these two incredible documentaries. One was called Ethnic Notions, and it was about Black people's representation in film in Hollywood, and Color Adjustment was about Black people's representation in television. And so it was really Ethnic Notions and Celluloid Closet that really were just perspective changing for me. And I always wanted there to be, I was always curious what that history was for trans people and what that would look like with that sort of analysis and critique. And, fast forward to 2014 and the trans visibility is rising, and trans topics are in sort of popular discourse more than they ever have been before. But I really thought there was more to the story than what we were hearing, and I wanted to create. I kind of wanted to fill in some of those gaps for what was happening in the moment, and that's what led to Disclosure.
So 6 years in the making.
5. So, I started thinking about it. Well, I've been probably thinking about it for 20 years, but started the research in 2015. But you're right, 2014 was when it kind of perked up.
I love that you said Celluloid Closet, because that's actually my next question, because Celluloid Closet is like one of my all-time favorite documentaries. And as a person in media, I think it really shaped how I look at media as a queer person and what I wanted to do to represent people in LGBTQ media. So love that there's that connection there. But I'm curious, Jen, have you seen Celluloid Closet?
I was just thinking, I have to watch that tonight because this keeps coming up in interviews and I've never seen it. Isn't that terrible?
Bad theory.
It's like 20 years old now.
1995.
Yeah. But it still makes such an impact, and it's so fascinating to watch where we had come to there, and then this like massive leap that we have taken in the last 20 years.
I do think Celluloid Closet helped to change things for gay and lesbian representation. I really do.
Well, Jen, you'll have to tweet me when you finally watch it, because I think
absolutely
love it.
We're gonna watch it tonight. I swear.
Right.
We have to.
Has Rebecca seen it?
No, I don't think she has either. Oh. She's a documentary filmmaker.
God. I want to watch it with the two of you.
Okay, great. We'll get on Zoom. We'll watch it together.
Well, Jen, you are one of my favorite rising stars. And you're featuring quite a few of the more recent projects in Disclosure. So you are very vulnerable and very open in the documentary at times, so it's really impactful. What was your experience like speaking about trans representation for this film?
It's interesting because I do speak a lot about trans representation. I'm pretty confident in my ability to articulate and contextualize the issues. What was different about Disclosure is, whereas that was often a kind of purely intellectual exercise in most venues, with Disclosure, with having Sam, who's an old friend right there, with having a trans cinematographer who I'd worked with before right there, with looking around and seeing so many trans people, it allowed for a degree of vulnerability that I don't think I've ever had in a conventional interview or documentary setting before. So it's really a credit to the set, the tone on set that Sam worked so hard to create. It allowed that kind of vulnerability. There was a sense of trust amongst all of us, not only of trust, but also there was a kind of raising of stakes, because the kinds of people we were talking about, the people who were directly impacted by these images that we were discussing, were all around us. I would say something and I could see people groaning at the memory of something, or lighting up at the memory of something positive, and so much more like an intimate conversation than the kind of normal kind of philosophical meanderings that I might do on the subject.
I think that certainly comes across to the viewer. It feels different. And that's why I think, to me, it reminds me so much of Celluloid Closet, which had a very emotional depth to it that I don't often see when we're chronicling media. You, especially when you are speaking of your own personal experiences, it really just gets you, and it shows you how important it is for people to be seen and to be a part of art that is out in the world.
Yeah, I think I think it's too easy to forget when we're talking about these issues that it's not just a social justice talking point. We're talking about real lives, and the impact that we have as children, as adults, when we see these images, particularly when these images are shown repeatedly, they help us understand ourselves, but often in a very malignant way, as the case with trans representation. I'm sure I talk about it in the film, but I know for me, one of the big ones was the images of men vomiting upon the disclosure of a trans body.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing I had seen so much and had played upon fears I already had in my head and my own kind of abhorrent self-image, that informed every interaction I had, while dating or with men. That's what's always playing on a loop in my head, because that's the only images I had of those kinds of
and from a young age, that's what you got too.
Right. I mean, I'll never forget Crying Game. I mean, and when that came out, there was the whole campaign was built around "Don't tell the secret." This is the whole thing was situated around the disclosure that this person was trans. But as a few people in the film talk about, there's two sides to that kind of representation too, because as horrific as it was, the reaction of the Stephen Rea character, the straight guy, upon finding out that Dill was trans, it's also ultimately a love story and a kind of sweet one. And there was something really beautiful and alluring about that representation, because it's also it's a possibility model. Oh, that exists. Now that I've seen it, I know that it's out there. So part of the genius of what Sam does is that I don't think anything in this film is just a critique. There's always those multiple layers.
Sure. Well, I wanted to ask both of you, after watching this documentary, I started looking at transcentric films, and it feels like we're way behind in film versus where we are on television. I know there are a lot, being in media, I know there are a lot of factors that go into that, but for people maybe who don't know, why do you think that's so?
I bet Jen probably has a more personal perspective on that, as someone who's been in both. Honestly, my guess is it really comes down to economics and turnover, right? You can make an episode for a television show much quicker and for much less money than it takes to make a feature film.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's exactly right. There's more risk involved with the feature film. There's also a consideration of a global audience in today's film market, whereas television can still be a little bit more niche. It can be more responsive. There's more room for risk there. It's a shame though, because I'm a movie lover. Pre-quarantine, I would go to the movie theater at least once a week, every week. That's how I like hearing stories told. And not only has there been a lack of trans representation in film, almost all of the trans representation on film, unlike some examples from television, have been written by typically straight cis white men, directed by straight white cis men, and often performed by straight cis white men. So
as like a person trying to put together like a list of like movies that I wanted to feature, I was like, holy shit, this sucks.
Yeah. And what is out there is entirely independent cinema. And Sam made a very conscious and I'm sure difficult choice in Disclosure only to focus on mainstream film and television, the kind of things that have really permeated so many aspects of popular culture. So there is some good independent film out there, but in terms of what your average American is seeing at the Cineplex, it's few and far between, and it's less than positive most of the time.
Can you both speak to what it's like now as trans creators and artists versus what it was like when you were first starting out?
You're frozen.
Oh.
But Jen, did you get that whole question? Oh yeah, you're back.
I'm back.
Hi.
Did you get the question or do you need me to repeat it?
I got the question. Did you get it, Jen?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Go ahead,
okay. So I started my first film in 2003. And at that time, even in like the queer or lesbian and gay film festivals, as they were called, there was very little conversation about trans people, very few films about trans people. So, I mean, even then, there was pushback towards trans people being included in gay and lesbian space. I mean, there was certainly no bathrooms that were safe for trans people at those film festivals. I mean, so that was the landscape that I kind of started in. So things have gone, and now Disclosure is being embraced and celebrated by the 4 top queer film festivals. They've come together to form a North American Queer Festival Alliance. And on Wednesday, the 24th, they're celebrating Disclosure all together as a game changer of the year and hosting a panel. And it's really lovely to be embraced by a space where 15 years ago this was certainly not the case. So that's where I started. What about you, Jen?
Similar. I mean, I've been in the industry for much shorter. It's only been about 5 years, and my entry point was just making my own content, and that kind of opened up a lot of doors for me. But what's been most striking about me along those lines is having gone from often being the only trans woman in a space, like when I'm going on a set or to an interview or at a film festival, to now it being pretty common, and where most of my friends, because most of my friends aren't trans, most of my friends are cis, and I know that I'm no longer their only trans friend, but they have multiple, trans friends. I can always expect that if I'm going to be on a panel, I'm not going to be the only trans person there, and that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference because it starts to reduce that burden of representation that we all too often carry, where I have to suddenly speak for everyone despite only having a very limited, narrow experience.
Woman, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about this the other day with everything that's happening now, about how it's similar. It's a similar feeling to how I'm seeing so many more white people really being proactive on conversations about race and dismantling white supremacy and undergoing anti-racist training. Like white people are doing that work themselves now. Much further to go, but it's a kind of beginning that I haven't seen before. And the same thing happened. I want to say, I'm not sure about it, maybe 2 years ago. I think it might have been when Trump first said that there was, the military was going to ban trans people. I remember just that feeling of like exhaustion and anxiety on hearing the news because, okay, I have to go speak up. Like I have to get on Twitter and I have Instagram and I have to say these things and I'm going to have to deal with all these hateful comments and misunderstandings and like argue for my own humanity. And it's so exhausting. And I went on and my timeline was just full of cis people already there, already making the arguments and making the arguments well. Like they had been listening, they had learned, they had educated themselves, they had trans people in their lives. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, it's not just on us anymore. And that's been the kind of biggest shift. I mean, the reaction to J.K. Rowling, the reaction to the kind of rise of trans-exclusive radical feminism in the UK, the reaction to Trump's multiple attempts to legislate trans people out of existence, the multiple bathroom bills, they've all been met with resistance that goes far beyond the very small minority of trans people. And that gives me a lot of hope.
That gives me hope too. What do you hope that people get out of watching Disclosure?
Jen, you want to
No,
speak on that? I mean, I hope people critically interrogate their relationship to film and television, about trans people and about all marginalized communities, for better or for worse. We've all taken the brunt of this. I mean, if you're not a cis, white, straight dude, you're othered in the media. And so I really hope people can really interrogate their belief systems and become more active consumers. Jen, what do you hope?
I'm always a little loath to project hopes onto an audience. I hope they sit through the whole thing, and then beyond that, anything is bonus. But I think they will. I'll never forget a moment a few years after my mom and I had reconciled after my transition, and I was down in North Carolina with her, and she was watching NCIS, a very popular, procedural show, and there was several jokes about trans women at the expense of trans women, about a guy had met a girl in a bar. It turned out to, she was really a man, and they would make fun of the character for being gay. And then there were a couple other things in that same night, like over 3 hours of us watching primetime network television, there were multiple jokes at the expense of trans women. And I remember my mom just kind of perking up after each one. And then finally, after the third or fourth, looking at me and going, I never realized this before. I've been watching this. I just never noticed that before. And I look, I'm like, yeah, you never had to until you had a trans daughter, and now you see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if I were to be so bold as to have a hope for the audience, it's that after seeing Disclosure, they can never unsee the way that trans people have been represented on screen. And like Sam said, ideally, that they can then extend that perspective outward to other marginalized peoples.
I know we're all in a really weird time. Everything's on hold, projects are on hold, things like that. But are there any projects or artists that you're just really excited about right now, or you want to share them on a bigger platform?
Oh, God, there's always so many. There like dozens are just flying in my head. I suppose the one that's always at the top of my head, because he was my roommate until I came to Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, was Brian Michael Smith, who's a Black trans actor who was on
great. Yeah, he's so great.
And then 9/11 Lone Star that got picked up by a second season, and to see this. I think for this little bit of the trans moment, it's been very focused on trans women, and frankly, mostly white trans people. And to see a Black trans man on a show like 911 that has a really far reach, playing a fireman, where his transness isn't what his character is all about, but it's also not erased. That to me is incredibly exciting.
Isn't that the goal? I don't want to, as a queer person, I don't want to see characters assimilated into I don't want their queerness or their transness to not to be an important part of who they are, because it is a vital, important part of who we are.
I come back to the show Better Things every season because Pam Adler and I met at an event. She really liked me. She's like, just come be in the show. And one time I said something about my character being trans. She's like, or you can just be a regular woman. It doesn't need to be a thing. And I know that and I love Pam, she's a good friend. And I know that she meant something really positive in that. She's like, you don't have to be the special issue. You can just be you. But really the next step is exactly that, beyond that thinking, which is I can be trans and just be a regular person. That's fine. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but also it doesn't have to be erased. I mean, I always joke that because a lot of my characters, on Blind Spot as well, on Better Things, there's never any mention of them being trans. And so people are like, she's playing a cis character. I'm like, no, I'm not. Unless you see a literal baby coming out of my vagina, my character is a trans woman. It just might not be relevant, but she's trans because I am.
Oh my gosh. My wife stands you so much. Such a big fan. I haven't gotten to watch all of it, but Mrs. Fletcher loves it, loves you, was very excited. I was going to be talking to you today.
That was a really fun project. And it was one where that's an interesting example, because I think from the time that Tom wrote the book to the time that we were filming the show, which is maybe I don't know, 5 to 7 year period, absolutely everything changed for trans issues. And the depiction in the book would come off as very cliche in today's cultural context. It's this, late transitioning white middle class, married with kids, former star athlete who comes out as trans and like overdoes femininity. It's like a kind of classic, trans trope. And then by the time we were shooting the show, like that just wouldn't fly. And Tom and the other showrunners all knew, like, well, we have to be in conversation with trans people to make sure this is an authentic, sincere portrayal. And they worked with me to shape the character into something more interesting. And I don't think that would have happened had it been made 5 years earlier. So that's another really good indication of how far things have come.
What about you, Sam? What are some things that you're really excited about?
I always pause at that question because I feel it just makes me so nervous.
I don't want to make you nervous. I just want to be able to give you an opportunity to plug away at your projects, to plug away at your friends' projects. Like, that's really important to me at Queer Media Matters, that I give like platforms to people who totally deserve it. And let me know if there's anyone I can help.
I will send you a list because it would take too long. There are so many trans people making incredibly powerful work right now that I would love to amplify.
Well, that's fantastic. I honestly, please send me that list, because I would definitely love to feature anyone that you recommend.
Absolutely.
I'd say that the thing that most excites me right now is the Black Trans Lives Matter protest event march that happened in Brooklyn over the weekend. Seeing thousands of people show up for something that's specifically about Black trans lives has completely changed me. I did not think I would see that in my lifetime. The fact that it was led and organized by Black trans women, one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my lifetime.
I feel like I've felt so heavy this week, and this conversation has just filled me with so much more joy and hope. So I want to thank the two of you for that. And now, Sam, tell everyone when they can see Disclosure.
Disclosure will be released this Friday, June 19th, on Netflix as a Netflix original.
Oh, I've never heard of the Netflix. What is this Netflix?
The thing where you get DVDs in the mail? I didn't know that was still going.
Like the juggernaut of all juggernauts. Yes.
Yeah, I'm grateful that we have this platform to reach a worldwide audience, and we're still committed to making sure that the film is available to people who don't have Netflix, who don't have access to Netflix, communities who need to see it most. And so we'll be working really hard over the next few months on our impact campaign to make sure it reaches people who don't necessarily have access to the film through Netflix. But we are thrilled and honored to have that platform. I think their reach is
183 countries. Yeah. Simultaneously. That's what's really remarkable about the reach of Netflix. Sam and I and some others were talking about this last week, that, we're also American-centric, understandably, and we think about the impact of the film here. But Netflix shows are everywhere, and a lot of places where trans people are violently oppressed, where it's really not safe to be a not trans person, they'll be able to see this film on their phone in the privacy of their own bedrooms.
Access is a major issue for LGBTQ content.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad, and I feel so blessed that this film is going to have such reach and such access.
I'm excited because from this point on, every time I'm ever involved in a project, I say, I'll do it if everyone involved goes and watch this documentary first. And that's the only condition.
So where can people find both of you on the social medias?
I'm more active on Instagram, so it's samfader_1, and Jen is everywhere. But Twitter is your spot.
Well, I guess Twitter's what I'm that's my native spot. That's what I like the most. It's words. But I'm smartass Jen on every social media. Lately, I've been doing TikTok though. That's been fun.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah,
I'm in the category of just a little too old for TikTok.
I suspect I'm older than you, and I would have thought the same thing.
What did you do? What did you post for TikTok? What did you do?
We just did my girlfriend and I did a bunch of silly videos.
Lesbian TikTok is the thing, Sam.
That's the thing. Lesbian TikTok is
It's gonna save the world. It's amazing. Like I watch it and I'm like, bless you, children.
It's so great. It is so great. They're so creative. Again, my girlfriend is a videographer and she's really big on TikTok. She's been for like over a year now pushing it on everybody she ever meets. She's like, this is where kids are being most creative is TikTok. And she finally got me to really get into it. And now we started making our own videos and it's a lot of fun.
Well, be sure to check those out. And everybody check out Disclosure this Friday on Netflix. Yeah.
Yay!
Thank you, Tina.